The bouquet sailed through the air at my daughter Sarah's wedding, and somehow landed right in my 67-year-old hands. Everyone cheered as confetti sparkled around us. The Whitmore family mansion glowed golden behind me, and Brandon looked like the perfect groom every mother dreams of for her daughter. But when I looked down at the white roses and baby's breath, my blood turned to ice. Hidden between the stems was a tiny piece of paper, barely visible, with Sarah's handwriting. "Mom, please help me. I'm trapped." I quickly stuffed the note into my purse, forcing a smile as the wedding photographer snapped pictures of me holding the bouquet. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I had to keep up appearances. The Whitmore estate stretched before us like something from a movie set, with manicured gardens that probably cost more than my annual pension. Crystal chandeliers hung from every archway, and servers in crisp uniforms carried silver trays of champagne that sparkled like liquid diamonds. "Congratulations, Mrs. Patterson." Richard Whitmore approached me with his commanding presence. Even at 72, he moved like a man who owned everything he surveyed. His steel gray hair was perfectly styled, and his tuxedo probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Your daughter is a lucky woman. Brandon will take excellent care of her." Something in his tone made my skin crawl, but I nodded politely. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. This is all so beautiful." "Money well spent," he replied, his pale blue eyes studying me like I was a balance sheet. "Family is everything. Wouldn't you agree? We protect what's ours." Before I could respond, Brandon appeared at my elbow. At 28, he was undeniably handsome with his dark hair and athletic build. He'd charmed me completely during their 6-month courtship, always bringing flowers and asking about my late husband, Robert. Now, watching him guide me toward the reception tent, something felt different. His grip on my arm was just a little too firm. "I hope you're enjoying yourself, Janine," he said, flashing that $1,000,000 smile. "Sarah means the world to me. I'd do anything to keep her safe and happy." The way he emphasized anything sent another chill down my spine. I glanced around, searching for Sarah among the 300 guests. She stood near the wedding cake, radiant in her flowing white gown, but even from across the tent I could see the tension in her shoulders. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away. The reception hall buzzed with conversation about the perfect couple. Women in designer dresses gushed about the fairy tale romance, while men in expensive suits discussed Brandon's bright future in his father's empire. Everyone seemed genuinely thrilled for Sarah, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. "Such a lovely ceremony," Agnes whispered beside me. My 72-year-old friend had been my emotional anchor since Robert's death 3 years ago. Though I have to say, that young man barely let Sarah out of his sight. I followed her gaze and realized she was right. Every time Sarah tried to move away from Brandon's side, he appeared with some excuse to redirect her. When her college friend Jessica approached, Brandon smoothly inserted himself into the conversation. When Sarah's cousin tried to pull her aside, Brandon reminded her about photos with his business associates. "Maybe he's just nervous," I suggested, though my instincts screamed otherwise. Agnes murmured, adjusting her bifocals. "Nervous grooms usually pace. This one's tracking." The dancing began as the sun set behind the mansion's towers. Brandon swept Sarah onto the floor for their first dance, and she moved like someone trying not to stumble. Her smile never wavered, but her hands trembled against his shoulders. When he whispered something in her ear, she stiffened almost imperceptibly. I tried approaching them twice during the evening, but both times Brandon steered the conversation toward safe topics, while keeping Sarah pressed against his side. When I suggested we take some photos of just the three of us, Brandon insisted his parents be included. When I asked Sarah about honeymoon plans, Brandon answered for her with elaborate details about a private island resort. "Everything's been arranged," he said, his arm tightening around Sarah's waist. 2 weeks completely alone together. No outside contact, no distractions, just us. The way Sarah's face went pale made my chest constrict. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again when Brandon's grip shifted. As the evening wound down, I made one final attempt to get Sarah alone. I followed her toward the mansion when she excused herself, but Brandon's voice stopped me cold in the marble foyer. "Family photos in the library," he called out cheerfully. "Sarah, darling, your mother can wait. The photographer's on a schedule." Through the partially open door of what must have been Richard's study, I heard Brandon's voice change completely. Gone was the charm, replaced by something sharp and commanding. She signed the papers, Dad. The prenup locks everything down. And if she ever tries to leave, we have enough dirt on her family to destroy them completely, mother-in-law included. My blood froze. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear Richard's response. Excellent work. The Patterson woman seems harmless enough, but we can't afford loose ends. Once they return from the honeymoon, make sure Sarah understands exactly what's at stake. Already handled, Brandon replied with satisfaction. She knows what happens if she steps out of line. Poor girl's terrified of losing the only family she has left. I backed away slowly, my mind reeling. The note in the bouquet suddenly made perfect, horrible sense. My daughter hadn't married a dream man. She'd walked into a nightmare. And somehow, they were using threats against me to keep her trapped. The next morning, I sat in my modest one-bedroom apartment, staring at Sarah's note. The contrast between my simple furniture and yesterday's luxury felt like whiplash. My hands shook as I read those desperate words again. Mom, please help me. I'm trapped. I'd barely slept, replaying every moment of the wedding. How had I missed the signs? How long had Sarah been suffering in silence? The memory of Brandon's cold voice discussing their dirt on my family made my stomach churn. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Richard Whitmore's business empire was impressive on the surface. Whitmore Construction had built half the commercial properties in our city over the past 30 years. Whitmore Investments managed millions in real estate portfolios. The family donated generously to charities and political campaigns. But when I dug deeper into newspaper archives at the public library, disturbing patterns emerged. 3 former business partners had mysteriously gone bankrupt after disputes with Richard. A city councilman who opposed one of Whitmore's development projects had suddenly resigned following an ethics investigation that was never fully explained. 2 whistleblowers who'd tried to expose safety violations at Whitmore construction sites had withdrawn their complaints and left town. Frank Kowalski speaking, came the gruff voice when I called my late husband's former colleague. Frank, it's Janine Patterson, Robert's wife. I need your help with something. Frank had worked construction for 40 years before retiring. He and Robert had been close friends, bonding over their shared distrust of corrupt contractors and city officials. Janine, of course. What's going on? What do you know about Whitmore Construction? The long pause told me everything. Why are you asking about those sharks? I explained about Sarah's marriage, leaving out the note but mentioning my concerns about Brandon's controlling behavior. Jesus, Janine, your daughter married into that family? Frank's voice dropped to a whisper. Listen to me carefully. Richard Whitmore is poison. Back in the 80s, I worked on a project where they used substandard concrete. When I tried to report it, I got visited by some very unfriendly men who suggested I mind my own business. The building collapsed 2 years later during an earthquake. 3 people died. My hand tightened on the phone. Did you report it? I tried. But suddenly my work records went missing, and someone spread rumors that I was drinking on the job. Robert helped me find work across town, or I would have been blacklisted completely. Whitmore doesn't just destroy buildings, Janine. He destroys people who get in his way. After hanging up, I called my friend Agnes. Her 40 years as a real estate agent had given her connections throughout the city's social circles. Oh my, Agnes breathed when I told her about my research. I wondered why you looked so pale at the reception. Janine, there are rumors about that family that would curl your hair. We met at her favorite coffee shop, a little place downtown where Agnes had conducted business for decades. She slid a manila folder across the table, with hands that trembled slightly. I made some calls after you left yesterday, she said quietly. Richard Whitmore's first wife, Brandon's mother, died 15 years ago. Officially, she fell down the stairs at their mansion. But Margaret Chen, who used to clean house for them, told me the woman had been planning to leave Richard, said she was scared of him. I opened the folder to find newspaper clippings about Catherine Whitmore's death. The articles were brief, clinical, accidental death, no signs of foul play, funeral attended by the city's elite. There's more, Agnes continued, glancing around nervously. 2 women tried to come forward about Whitmore business practices in recent years. Helen Rodriguez filed complaints about bribery in the zoning department. Susan Walsh tried to expose money laundering through their charity foundation. Both women suffered mysterious break-ins at their homes within weeks. Nothing stolen, but their personal files were destroyed. Both families moved out of state shortly after. My coffee grew cold as I absorbed this information. Agnes, what kind of people did Sarah marry into? The kind who make problems disappear, honey. The kind who... She paused, studying my face. Janine, what aren't you telling me? You didn't just have wedding jitters yesterday. Something specific happened. I wanted to tell her about the note, but some instinct warned me to keep Sarah's desperate message secret for now. I just got a bad feeling about Brandon. The way he watched her, controlled every conversation. Agnes nodded grimly. Trust those instincts. Women like us, we've seen enough of life to recognize predators, even when they wear expensive suits. That evening, I tried calling Sarah's cell phone repeatedly. Each call went straight to voicemail with the same chirpy message. Hi, you've reached Sarah Whitmore. Brandon and I are starting our new life together. Leave a message and I'll get back to you when I can. Even her voicemail sounded wrong. Sarah had never used that sing-song voice before, and she'd changed her name already, less than 24 hours after the ceremony. I was researching Whitmore's offshore business connections when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Agnes standing in the hallway with another woman I didn't recognize. This is Carmen Delgado, Agnes said when I opened the door. She used to work for the city planning department. Carmen was a small, nervous woman in her 50s with worried brown eyes. She kept glancing toward the stairs as if expecting someone to follow her. I shouldn't be here, Carmen whispered as I led them to my living room. But Agnes said you needed to know about the Whitmores. She told me about her 20-year career processing, building permits, and zoning applications. How Richard Whitmore's projects always seemed to get approved despite obvious code violations. How city officials who questioned his applications were mysteriously reassigned or forced into early retirement. I kept copies, Carmen admitted, pulling a flash drive from her purse. Building inspections that were falsified, environmental reports that were buried, safety violations that disappeared from official records. I've been terrified to use them because I know what happens to people who cross that family. Why are you showing me this now? I asked. Carmen's eyes filled with tears. Because I have a daughter too. She's 25. Same age as yours. If some monster had trapped her the way they've trapped Sarah, I'd want someone to help me fight back. I stared at her. What do you mean, trapped Sarah? Agnes and Carmen exchanged glances. Finally, Agnes spoke up. Janine, the Whitmore family has a pattern. Young women from middle-class families, girls who are beautiful and educated but not wealthy. They target them, charm them, marry them quickly. The wives become hostages to ensure their families don't interfere with Whitmore business. Carmen nodded. I've seen the divorce records. 3 women have tried to leave Whitmore men over the past 10 years. All 3 withdrawals their divorce petitions within months. All 3 families suffered mysterious financial disasters that bankrupted them completely. My blood ran cold as the pieces fell into place. Sarah's whirlwind 6-month courtship, Brandon's intense focus on our family history. His questions about Robert's business dealings and my financial situation. They researched us, I whispered. They found something they could use against us. Most likely, Agnes confirmed sadly. Richard Whitmore doesn't make moves without leverage. The question is, what do they think they have on your family? I thought about Robert's small construction business, his meticulous record-keeping, his absolute honesty in all our financial dealings. We'd never been wealthy, but we'd always been honest. What could the Whitmores possibly have found? Carmen stood to leave, pressing the flash drive into my hands. Be careful, Mrs. Patterson. These people have connections everywhere. Police, judges, politicians. They've been building their network for 30 years. After they left, I sat alone with the flash drive, understanding finally dawning. Sarah hadn't just married a controlling husband. She'd been deliberately targeted by a criminal organization that used marriage as a weapon, and somehow, they were threatening my family to keep her compliant. I looked at Sarah's note again, seeing it now as what it truly was. A desperate SOS from a daughter who believed her mother was smart enough and brave enough to find a way to save her. I'm coming, baby girl, I whispered to my empty apartment. Mama's going to find a way. 3 days of surveillance felt like an eternity. I'd parked across from Sarah's new downtown penthouse every morning, watching for any sign of her. The 30-story luxury building had doormen and security cameras, making it impossible to simply walk inside. Brandon left each morning at exactly 8:15 in his silver Mercedes, dressed in expensive suits and carrying a leather briefcase. He returned precisely at 6:30 each evening. But Sarah never appeared. On Thursday morning, desperation finally paid off. I followed Brandon's usual route and spotted Sarah's red Honda Civic, the car she'd driven since college, pulling out of the building's underground garage 20 minutes after Brandon left. My heart leaped as I followed her through downtown traffic, careful to stay several cars behind. She drove to an upscale grocery store in the financial district, the kind of place where organic tomatoes cost $8 a pound. I waited until she'd been inside for 10 minutes before following her in. I found her in the produce section, staring blankly at a display of artisanal lettuce. Even from behind, I could see how thin she'd become. Her shoulders, once proud and straight, now curved inward like she was trying to disappear. "Sarah," I whispered, approaching slowly. She spun around, and I barely suppressed a gasp. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her cheekbones stood out sharp against pale skin. But it was the fear that flashed across her face that broke my heart. "Mom," she breathed, glancing frantically around the store. "You can't be here. If Brandon finds out..." "Sweetheart, we need to talk. I got your note." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I shouldn't have. I was desperate. "Mom, you have to leave. They'll hurt you." I took her arm gently, guiding her toward the back of the store where fewer people were shopping. "Tell me what's happening." "All of it." Sarah's composure crumbled completely. Between sobs, the truth poured out in whispered fragments that made my blood boil with maternal rage. "It started 6 months before the engagement," she said, wiping her nose with a tissue I handed her. "Brandon seemed perfect. Romantic, attentive, interested in everything about me, about us. He asked so many questions about Dad's business, about your finances, about our family history. I thought he was just being thorough because he loved me. Then he proposed, and everything accelerated. The wedding had to be right away. He said he couldn't wait to start our life together. When I suggested a longer engagement, he got upset. Said his father was retiring soon and needed to see Brandon settled first." She paused, checking the aisles around us nervously. "The prenup was presented to me 2 days before the wedding. 15 pages of legal language that basically said if we divorced, I'd leave with nothing. When I tried to have a lawyer review it, Brandon said there wasn't time. He seemed so hurt that I didn't trust him. Then Dad's tax records surfaced." My stomach dropped. "What tax records?" "Brandon's accountants discovered that Dad made some mistakes on his business taxes the last 2 years before he died. Small errors, maybe $5,000 total in underpaid taxes. But they'd found additional documentation that made it look like deliberate fraud totaling $50,000. I felt the world tilt around me. Robert had been meticulous with his taxes, sometimes spending weeks on preparations. That's impossible. Your father never cheated on anything in his life. I know that. You know that. But Brandon showed me documents with Dad's signature, bank records showing cash deposits that weren't reported. He said his father's people found the discrepancies during routine background checks before the wedding." Sarah's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "They said if I didn't marry Brandon, they'd have to report the tax fraud to the IRS. You'd lose the house, your pension, everything. You could even go to prison for inheriting proceeds from tax evasion." The pieces of their manipulation came together with sickening clarity. They fabricated evidence against your father. "I figured that out too late," Sarah admitted. "By then, I was trapped." They also showed me photos of Tommy at college. Pictures of him walking to class, studying in the library, eating dinner with friends. Brandon said his father's business required them to protect their interests. If I caused problems, Tommy might have unfortunate accidents. I wanted to scream, to rage against the evil that had ensnared my daughter. Instead, I forced myself to stay calm and gather information. "What's happening now? In the apartment?" Sarah's hands shook as she gripped the shopping cart. "Brandon monitors everything. My phone, my computer, my emails. He says it's for security, but I know he's watching for any sign that I might try to leave. He controls all the money. Even grocery shopping has to be approved." "Have you tried calling the police?" "With what evidence?" "Brandon's never hit me, never threatened me directly. He's always gentle and loving in public. And the Whitmores donate hundreds of thousands to the Police Benevolent Fund. What officer is going to believe that the perfect son of their biggest supporter is holding me prisoner with forged tax documents?" She was right, and that realization made me feel sick. "Sarah, there has to be something we can do." "Mom, there's more." Her voice cracked completely. "I'm 8 weeks pregnant." The grocery store seemed to spin around me. "Does Brandon know?" "Not yet. I've been hiding the morning sickness, making excuses about being tired from wedding stress. But I heard Brandon talking to his father about our timeline. They want children right away. And once there's a baby, she couldn't finish the sentence. They'll have permanent leverage over both of us, I completed grimly. Sarah nodded, fresh tears falling. I overheard Richard telling Brandon that once a child is born, they'll have generational control over our family. The baby will be raised to continue their business empire, and will never be able to leave because they'll threaten to take our grandchild away. The full scope of their plan hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about controlling Sarah, it was about breeding the next generation of accomplices and hostages. "I'm scared for my baby," Sarah whispered. "I'm scared they'll drug me during pregnancy like they've been doing with my food. I'm scared they'll take the child away if I don't comply perfectly. I'm scared they'll hurt you, or Tommy, if I try to fight back." "Drug you?" My voice came out strangled. "The prenatal vitamins Brandon insists I take make me sleepy and confused. My coffee tastes bitter in the mornings. I think they're keeping me sedated so I can't think clearly or plan any kind of escape." I pulled my daughter into a fierce hug, feeling her trembling against me. "Listen to me carefully, Sarah. I'm going to find a way to get you out of this. All of you, the baby too. Mom, you don't understand how powerful they are. They have connections everywhere. Police, judges, politicians, people who've tried to cross them before have lost everything. Then we'll have to be smarter than they are," I said with more confidence than I felt. "You're not alone anymore, baby girl. I know what's happening, and I'm not going to let them destroy our family." Sarah pulled back, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time. "How? They've thought of everything. I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. Your mama didn't raise you to give up without a fight, and I sure as hell didn't survive 67 years to be intimidated by some overgrown playground bullies with fancy suits." For the first time in days, Sarah almost smiled. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. Now listen carefully. We need to be smart about this. Can you get away from the apartment again? Maybe once more, but it's risky. Brandon's been asking why I need to go grocery shopping when they have a meal delivery service. Then we'll make this count. Give me 3 days to do some research. Can you hold on that long?" Sarah nodded, though I could see the fear creeping back into her eyes. "What if he finds out we met?" "He won't. And Sarah, no matter what happens, don't sign any more papers, don't take any medications you can avoid, and don't tell Brandon about the pregnancy until we have a plan." We parted ways carefully, leaving the store at different times. But as I drove home, my mind was already racing with possibilities. The Whitmores had made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed that a 67-year-old widow would be too frightened and powerless to fight back. They were about to learn that a mother protecting her cubs is the most dangerous creature on earth. By the following Monday, I'd assembled what felt like a small army. Marcus Webb, the private investigator I'd hired with my retirement savings, looked nothing like the detectives in movies. 58 years old with graying hair and a slight limp from his police days, he sat in my living room drinking coffee from my second-best china and reviewing the files Agnes had helped me compile. "This is solid work," Marcus said, flipping through the documents Carmen had provided on the flash drive. "Building code violations, falsified inspections, bribery evidence. But getting it to the right people is the challenge. The Whitmores have spent 30 years building their network of protection." "What about the FBI?" I asked. "Surely they can't corrupt federal agents." Marcus gave me a look that said I was still naive about how power worked. "Federal agents are human too, Mrs. Patterson. They have mortgages, kids in college, career aspirations. Going after someone with Richard Whitmore's connections takes more than just evidence. It takes bulletproof evidence and agents willing to risk their careers." Still, he'd arranged a meeting with Agent Patricia Rivera from the FBI's white-collar crime division. Rivera was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, who listened carefully as I explained the situation, leaving out only the most dangerous details about threats to Tommy. "The tax fraud allegations against your late husband concern me," Agent Rivera said after reviewing our materials. "If the Whitmores fabricated federal tax documents, that's a serious felony. But proving fabrication requires access to their accounting systems and original documents. Can you get warrants?" Marcus asked. Agent Rivera hesitated. "Richard Whitmore has been investigated before. 3 times in the past 15 years, the cases were dropped due to insufficient evidence or witness recantation. He has excellent lawyers and political connections. Without overwhelming evidence, any investigation would likely be shut down before it began." My heart sank, but Rivera continued. "However, If we could gather additional evidence independently, prove a pattern of criminal behavior beyond just one case, that might be different. Marcus and I exchanged glances. What kind of evidence? I asked. Recordings of criminal conspiracy, financial records showing money laundering, documentation of systematic witness intimidation, something that would make it impossible for his political friends to intervene. After Agent Rivera left, Marcus laid out a plan that made my stomach churn with fear and anticipation. We need to get inside their operation, he said. The charity foundation is our best bet. They use it to launder money and build social connections. If you could volunteer there, get access to their offices, maybe we could gather the evidence Rivera needs. Is that legal? Recording conversations in public spaces is legal. Photographing documents you're legitimately asked to handle is legal. The key is doing everything by the book so the evidence can be used in court. Marcus provided me with a tiny recording device that looked like a hearing aid and a pen with a built-in camera. These will pick up conversations and documents without anyone knowing. But Mrs. Patterson, this is dangerous. If they catch you. They won't, I said with more confidence than I felt. I'm just a harmless old widow looking to volunteer my time. The Whitmore Children's Foundation had offices in a gleaming downtown high-rise. I'd called claiming to be interested in volunteer work, and they'd eagerly scheduled an appointment. Apparently, wealthy widows were exactly what they needed for their upcoming charity gala. Linda Harrington, the foundation's volunteer coordinator, was a perfectly groomed woman in her 50s who gushed about the wonderful work the Whitmores did for underprivileged children. We're planning our annual fundraiser for December, Linda explained, leading me through offices filled with expensive furniture and fresh flowers. It requires months of preparation, and we desperately need experienced women who understand how to coordinate complex events. I organized fundraisers for my husband's construction company for 20 years. I lied smoothly. I'd be delighted to help. The tour included a walk past Richard Whitmore's private office, where Linda knocked respectfully before peering inside. Mr. Whitmore, I'd like you to meet Janine Patterson, our newest volunteer. Richard rose from behind a massive mahogany desk, his cold blue eyes studying me carefully. For a moment, I was terrified he'd recognize me from the wedding, but his expression remained politely neutral. Mrs. Patterson, welcome to our family. I understand you're recently widowed. Construction business, was it? Yes, sir. My husband Robert ran Patterson Construction for 35 years. Something flickered in Richard's eyes. Patterson Construction. I believe I knew your husband's reputation. Solid work, honest dealings. A rare combination in that industry. The way he emphasized honest made my skin crawl, but I smiled graciously. Robert always said integrity was more valuable than profit. Indeed. Well, I'm sure you'll find our foundation's work deeply rewarding. Linda, please make sure Mrs. Patterson receives access to all the planning documents she needs. Over the following 2 weeks, I threw myself into gala planning with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely cared about children's charities. I arrived early, stayed late, and made myself indispensable to Linda and her staff. The recording device captured hours of mundane conversations about catering and decorations, but patience paid off. During my 3rd week, I was filing donation records when I overheard Richard on a phone call in his office. The door was slightly ajar, and his voice carried clearly. The Martinez project needs to move faster, he was saying. Pay whatever it takes to expedite the environmental review. If that means additional contributions to the city council members' campaign funds, so be it. I activated the recording device and continued filing while straining to hear more. What do you mean the inspector is asking questions? Then replace him with someone more cooperative. We've done it before. Yes, I understand the risks, but this project is worth $12 million in profit. A few thousand in strategic donations is a wise investment. My hands trembled as I photographed donation records that seemed to correspond with the conversation I was recording. Large donations to city officials' campaigns, timed perfectly with major Whitmore construction projects. The breakthrough came during my 4th week, when Linda asked me to help organize Richard's files for the accountant's quarterly review. Mr. Whitmore is very particular about his records, she explained, handing me boxes of documents. Everything must be categorized precisely, and copies made for both the foundation files and the construction company files. As I worked through bank statements and tax documents, patterns emerged that made my blood run cold. The foundation received donations from shell companies that were funded by Whitmore Construction. The money was then donated to political campaigns and consulting fees for city officials. It was a money laundering operation disguised as charity work. But the most damning evidence was a file labeled Family Security Measures. Inside were detailed backgrounds on dozens of families, including photos, financial records, and what appeared to be vulnerability assessments. I found my own family's file, complete with Robert's tax returns and a note. Potential leverage, minor tax discrepancies, widow's fixed income, son in college. Sarah's file was there too, along with 3 other young women who'd married into Whitmore business associates' families. Each file contained psychological profiles, family weaknesses, and strategies for maintaining control. I photographed everything with shaking hands, understanding finally the full scope of their operation. They didn't just corrupt officials and manipulate contracts. They systematically identified and targeted vulnerable families, using marriage as a weapon to create permanent hostages. The recording device captured Richard's voice as he spoke to someone about the Patterson situation later that afternoon. "The mother is more resourceful than we anticipated," he said. "Brandon reports that Sarah seems more stable lately, less compliant with her medications. We may need to accelerate the timeline." "What about the pregnancy?" came another voice. I didn't recognize. "Perfect leverage. Once the child is born, we'll have 3 generations under our control. The grandmother will never risk her grandchild's welfare." I felt sick listening to them discuss my unborn grandchild like a bargaining chip, but I forced myself to keep recording, to gather every piece of evidence possible. That evening, as I prepared to leave, the security system alerted Richard that someone had accessed his personal files. I was still in the file room when I heard his rapid footsteps approaching. Panic flooded my system, but years of crisis management as a school administrator kicked in. I quickly grabbed a stack of legitimate foundation documents and pretended to be organizing them when Richard burst through the door. "What are you doing here so late?" he demanded, his usual courtesy replaced by suspicion. "Linda asked me to finish categorizing the donation records for tomorrow's meeting," I replied calmly, showing him the papers in my hands. "I'm sorry if I set off some kind of alarm. I'm not very good with modern security systems." Richard studied me for a long moment, clearly debating whether to believe my explanation. "In the future, please clear any after-hours work with security. We can't be too careful with sensitive financial documents." "Of course, Mr. Whitmore. I certainly understand the need for security." I gathered my purse and coat, moving slowly to avoid appearing guilty or rushed. But as I waited for the elevator, I heard Richard making a phone call. "Run a complete background check on Janine Patterson. I want to know everything about her activities since her husband's death, and increase surveillance on Brandon's wife. Something's not right here." The elevator doors closed just as my knees began to shake. They were getting suspicious, which meant I was running out of time. But I had evidence now, real proof of their criminal operations. More importantly, I had a plan. Marcus and Agent Rivera would have to act quickly, but we might finally have enough to take down the Whitmore empire and free my daughter from their control. As I drove home through the city lights, I allowed myself to hope for the first time in weeks. The recording device and camera contained enough evidence to destroy the Whitmores, but only if I could stay alive long enough to deliver it to the authorities. The real battle was just beginning. The next evening, I arrived home from grocery shopping to find my apartment door standing open. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached cautiously, but there was no need for stealth. Richard Whitmore and Brandon sat comfortably on my living room couch, as if they owned the place. "Mrs. Patterson," Richard greeted me with a cold smile. "Please, come in. We've been waiting to have a conversation with you." Brandon rose smoothly, his wedding day charm completely absent. Now I could see the predator beneath the polished surface. His dark eyes held no warmth, only calculation and threat. "Close the door," Richard commanded quietly. "This discussion requires privacy." I forced my legs to carry me into my own living room, setting my purse down with hands that barely trembled. Years of dealing with difficult parents and administrators had taught me to project calm even when terrified. "Gentlemen, this is unexpected. I wasn't aware we had anything to discuss." "Oh, but we do," Richard said, gesturing for me to sit in my own armchair. "Your recent volunteer work has been quite thorough. Linda tells me you've been exceptionally dedicated to learning about our foundation's operations." Brandon moved behind my chair, close enough that I could feel his presence like a looming shadow. "We appreciate dedication, Mrs. Patterson, but we're concerned about your motivations." Richard opened a leather briefcase and withdrew a manila folder. We've learned some interesting things about your activities since Sarah's wedding. Private investigators, FBI meetings, surveillance equipment purchases. Very enterprising for a grieving widow. My blood turned to ice. They knew about Marcus, about Agent Rivera, about everything. I'm not sure what you're implying, I said carefully. Let's dispense with games, Richard replied, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. You've been investigating our family. Gathering what you imagine is evidence of wrongdoing. You've involved federal agents and criminal investigators. Most concerning of all, you've been meeting secretly with my daughter-in-law. Brandon's hand settled on my shoulders, not quite restraining but making it clear that escape was impossible. We know about the grocery store conversation, Mrs. Patterson. We know about her pregnancy that she's been hiding. We know about your little conspiracy to undermine our marriage. Richard leaned forward, his pale eyes boring into mine. What you don't understand is the scope of what you're dealing with. Our family has spent 30 years building relationships, creating dependencies, establishing leverage over everyone who matters in this city. Judges, police chiefs, federal prosecutors, state legislators. We don't just have money, Mrs. Patterson. We have power. From his briefcase, he withdrew photographs of Marcus Webb entering his office, Agent Rivera in a restaurant, even pictures of Agnes and Carmen meeting at the coffee shop. Your investigator is former police, dismissed for excessive force complaints. His license is under review, and his mortgage is 3 months behind. Agent Rivera is facing a discrimination lawsuit from a former colleague. Her superiors are questioning her judgment. Your friend Agnes owes $60,000 in medical debt from her husband's cancer treatment. Carmen Delgado's daughter is applying for graduate school with a scholarship application that could be easily influenced. The message was clear. Everyone who'd helped me was vulnerable to retaliation. As for you, Richard continued, withdrawing more documents, we've discovered some very interesting discrepancies in your late husband's tax filings. Not the minor errors we initially found, but significant fraud spanning 7 years. Nearly $200,000 in unreported income and falsified business expenses. I stared at the documents, recognizing Robert's signature on forms I'd never seen before. Those are forgeries. My husband never cheated on his taxes. Prove it, Brandon said softly. Prove that these documents bearing his signature and thumbprints are fraudulent. Prove that the bank deposits matching unreported income never happened. Prove that the business expenses for equipment that was never purchased are false. Richard smiled with genuine pleasure at my shock. Our accounting department is very skilled, Mrs. Patterson. We can create a paper trail that would convince any auditor that your husband was a criminal. The IRS would seize your home, your pension, your savings. You'd spend your remaining years in poverty, possibly in prison. But we're not unreasonable people, Brandon added, his grip on my shoulders tightening slightly. Family is important to us. We believe in taking care of those we love. From his briefcase, Richard produced a cashier's check for $500,000 made out in my name. Consider this a wedding gift, he said, a token of appreciation for raising such a wonderful daughter. In exchange, you'll cease your investigation, terminate contact with federal agents and private detectives, and accept that Sarah is now part of our family. I stared at the check, understanding the true price they were offering. $500,000 for my daughter's freedom, for my grandchild's future, for my silence about their crimes. What happens if I refuse? I asked quietly. Richard's smile never wavered, but his eyes turned glacial. Your son Tommy is a bright young man, computer science major at UC Berkeley, isn't he? Brilliant future ahead of him, assuming he doesn't encounter any unfortunate accidents. College campuses can be dangerous places. Muggings, hit-and-run accidents, drug overdoses from substances planted in his dorm room. Brandon leaned down to whisper in my ear. Or maybe he'd suddenly find himself arrested for hacking into university systems. Amazing how much child pornography can be hidden in a computer's hard drive. His life would be ruined before he could prove his innocence. The casual way they discussed destroying my son's life made my vision blur with rage, but I forced myself to remain still, to think clearly. And Sarah? I managed to ask. Sarah will have a wonderful life, Richard said. Beautiful home, unlimited resources, healthy children who'll want for nothing. Of course, we'll need to ensure her emotional stability during pregnancy. The medications her doctor prescribes will help her maintain proper balance. You mean you'll drug her into compliance? We prefer to think of it as comprehensive health care, Brandon replied. Pregnant women can be prone to anxiety and depression. Proper medication prevents unnecessary stress that could harm our child. Richard stood, indicating the conversation was ending. You have 24 hours to decide, Mrs. Patterson. Accept our generous offer, or watch your family destroy themselves, fighting a battle they cannot win. Think about your grandchild, Brandon added as they moved toward the door. Think about the life we can provide versus the poverty and scandal that await if you continue this foolish crusade. After they left, I sat alone in my violated apartment, staring at the check that represented everything I'd fought against. They'd outmaneuvered me completely, turning my investigation against me and using it to strengthen their control. But as I thought about Sarah's desperate note, about my unborn grandchild being used as a pawn, about Tommy's innocent trust in the world's basic fairness, something hardened inside me that Richard Whitmore couldn't buy or threaten. They'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed that showing me the full extent of their power would break my spirit. Instead, it had shown me exactly how much they feared what I might accomplish. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus Webb's number. When he answered, I spoke with a calm that surprised even me. Marcus, it's Jeanine. They've shown their hand. Are you recording this call? Always. What happened? They just offered me $500,000 to stop investigating them. They also threatened to kill my son and drug my daughter into a coma. Marcus whistled softly. They're desperate. That means we're close to something that could destroy them. I need you to contact Agent Rivera immediately. Tell her I'm ready to take whatever risks are necessary to bring these monsters down. Jeanine, they're not bluffing about the threats. They've killed before. Then it's time someone fought back. Marcus, I'm 67 years old. I've lived a good life, loved a good man, raised good children. If I have to risk everything to save my daughter and grandchild, that's exactly what I'm going to do. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Richard Whitmore had completely misunderstood who he was dealing with. He saw a frightened widow who could be bought or intimidated. He was about to discover that nothing on earth is more dangerous than a grandmother protecting her family. The recording device in my earring had captured every word of Richard and Brandon's threats. Marcus Webb emerged from my bedroom closet, where he'd been hidden since 3 o'clock, carrying additional recording equipment that had documented the entire conversation. Outstanding work, Jeanine, he said, checking the audio levels on his equipment. We got everything. The bribery attempts, the tax document forgery, the threats against Tommy, their admission about drugging Sarah. This is enough to take down their entire operation. But the real surprise came when my doorbell rang again just minutes after the Whitmores left. Through the peephole, I saw Agent Rivera standing in the hallway with 3 other federal agents in dark suits. Perfect timing, I said, opening the door. We have everything you need. Agent Rivera stepped inside with her team, looking grimly satisfied. Mrs. Patterson, we've been watching this building for the past 2 hours. We recorded their arrival, their conversation inside your apartment, and their departure. Combined with the evidence you've gathered over the past month, we have enough for multiple federal warrants. I stared at her in confusion. I don't understand. How long have you been investigating the Whitmores? 18 months, she admitted. But every time we got close, witnesses disappeared or evidence vanished. We needed an inside source they wouldn't suspect, someone who could gather proof without triggering their political protection network. Marcus grinned at my shocked expression. Jeanine, did you really think a retired construction worker and a grieving widow could penetrate a criminal empire without professional help? Agent Rivera approached me 6 weeks ago, right after you hired me. We've been working together all along. The FBI has been using me as bait? I asked, feeling manipulated and angry. No, Rivera said firmly. We've been supporting your efforts to save your daughter, but we needed evidence that would hold up in court, and we needed it gathered by someone the Whitmores would underestimate. You were perfect for the job because you weren't a trained investigator. You were exactly what you appeared to be. A terrified mother willing to risk everything for her child. The implications sank in slowly. Tommy? Is he really in danger? Your son has been under protective surveillance for 2 weeks, Rivera assured me. Federal agents have been watching him around the clock, disguised as college security and campus maintenance workers. The photos the Whitmores showed you were taken by our agents, not theirs. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by new determination. What happens now? Rivera checked her watch. Right now, federal teams are executing simultaneous search warrants on the Whitmore mansion, their business offices, the foundation headquarters, and Richard's personal files. Brandon's apartment is being searched as we speak, and Sarah is being transported to a secure location for her protection. Sarah's safe? I asked breathlessly. Agent Martinez is with her now. She's being taken to a federal safe house where she'll receive medical attention and counseling. The drugs they've been giving her need to be purged from her system under proper medical supervision. Marcus pulled out his cell phone. Janine, there's someone who wants to talk to you. He dialed a number and handed me the phone. Sarah's voice came through clearly, stronger than I'd heard it in months. Mom? Oh my God, Mom. They told me you've been working with the FBI. You saved me. You actually saved me. Tears streamed down my face as I heard my daughter's relief and gratitude. Are you okay, sweetheart? The baby? We're both fine. The doctors say the sedatives they were giving me won't cause permanent harm. Mom, I can't believe you did this. When Agent Martinez showed me the recordings you made, I realized how incredibly brave you've been. I had help, I said, looking at Marcus and Agent Rivera with new appreciation. A lot of help from people who cared about justice. Agent Rivera took the phone back and spoke briefly with Sarah before hanging up. Mrs. Patterson, we need you to do one final thing for us. Brandon will likely try to contact you when he realizes Sarah is missing. We need you to wear a wire and meet with him. Let him incriminate himself further. Is that safe? Marcus asked. We'll have agents positioned throughout the area, but Brandon's desperate now, and desperate criminals make mistakes. If he tries to threaten or harm Mrs. Patterson, we'll have additional charges to add to his indictment. 2 hours later, Brandon's call came exactly as predicted. His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Mrs. Patterson, I need to speak with you immediately. Sarah seems to have left our apartment, and I'm concerned for her safety. Oh my, I replied, projecting innocent worry. I haven't heard from her. Should we call the police? No, absolutely not. This is a family matter. Can you meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street? I need to ask if Sarah said anything to you about being unhappy or wanting to leave. The coffee shop was perfect for surveillance. Agent Rivera's team had positioned themselves as customers, servers, and pedestrians within a 2-block radius. I wore recording devices in my jewelry and clothing that would capture every word. Brandon arrived looking haggard and desperate. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his expensive suit was wrinkled. He slid into the booth across from me, with wild eyes that darted constantly around the room. She's gone, he said without preamble. All her clothes are still there, her car's in the garage, but Sarah's disappeared. Did she contact you? Did she say anything about leaving me? Brandon, I'm sure there's a simple explanation. Maybe she went to visit a friend? You don't understand, he hissed, leaning across the table. If Sarah's talking to the wrong people, if she's spreading lies about our family, there will be consequences. Serious consequences for everyone involved. His mask of civility was completely gone now, replaced by the desperate fury of a trapped predator. What kind of consequences? I asked, activating the recording device in my watch. My father has connections you can't imagine. Police, judges, politicians, business leaders, people who owe him favors, people who fear him. If Sarah tries to leave me, if she tries to take my child, we'll destroy her. We'll destroy anyone who helps her. Brandon's voice rose as his panic increased. Do you have any idea what we're capable of? We've ruined families, bankrupted businesses, made people disappear completely. Your daughter signed legal documents that give us control over her life, over our child's life. She belongs to us now. That doesn't sound very loving, I said carefully. Love? Brandon laughed bitterly. This isn't about love, it's about power. Sarah was selected because she fit our requirements. Beautiful, intelligent, from a middle-class family with exploitable vulnerabilities. We researched dozens of candidates before choosing her. The recording device captured every word as Brandon revealed the full scope of their operation. We have 6 wives now, all carefully chosen and controlled. Each one produces children who will be raised in our empire, who will continue our business when we're gone. It's generational wealth management, Mrs. Patterson. We breed loyalty and dependence. He leaned forward, his eyes bright with fanatical certainty. Sarah can run, but she can't hide. We'll find her, and when we do, she'll learn what happens to property that tries to escape its owners. That's when Agent Rivera stood up from a nearby table, badge and weapon clearly visible. Brandon Whitmore, You're under arrest for conspiracy, kidnapping, fraud, and threatening a federal witness. Brandon's face went white as federal agents surrounded our table. You can't do this. My father has agreements with the Justice Department. We have protection. Your father is being arrested as we speak, Rivera informed him calmly. Turns out corruption only protects you until someone higher up the food chain decides you're more trouble than you're worth. As they led Brandon away in handcuffs, he screamed threats and promises of revenge that only added more charges to his growing list of federal crimes. I sat in the coffee shop afterward, shaking with adrenaline and relief. Marcus squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. It's over, Janine. You did it. You saved your daughter and brought down a criminal empire. Agent Rivera sat down across from me with a tired smile. Mrs. Patterson, you've helped us solve cases involving dozens of victims across 3 states. The evidence you gathered will put the Whitmores away for life and free families who've been trapped for years. As we left the coffee shop, I realized that the terrified, helpless feeling I'd carried since Sarah's wedding was finally gone. My daughter was safe, my grandchild would grow up free, and a family of monsters had been stopped from hurting anyone else. The battle was over, and somehow, against impossible odds, we'd won. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courthouse watching Richard Whitmore receive a sentence of 25 years in prison for racketeering, money laundering, bribery, and conspiracy. Brandon got 15 years for fraud, kidnapping, drugging, and conspiracy. The judge's words still echoed in my mind. The defendants showed a callous disregard for human dignity, treating families like business assets and children like property. This court will not tolerate such systematic abuse of power. The courtroom was packed with other victim families, people who'd been trapped by the Whitmore network for years. Helen Rodriguez, the woman who tried to expose their bribery, wept with relief as federal agents returned her confiscated files. Susan Walsh, whose money laundering accusations had been buried, finally saw justice for the crimes she'd witnessed. Carmen Delgado received a commendation from the Justice Department for her courage in preserving evidence that proved crucial to the investigation. But the sweetest victory came 3 weeks later, when Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl. We named her Hope Patricia Patterson, Hope for obvious reasons, Patricia after Agent Rivera, who'd helped save our family. She was born completely free of the drugs they'd been feeding Sarah, with bright eyes and strong lungs that announced her arrival to the world. I held my granddaughter in the hospital room, looking at Sarah's radiant face as she nursed her baby. The dark circles were gone, replaced by the glow of a woman who'd reclaimed her life. Tommy sat beside the bed, marveling at his tiny niece and talking about his plans to study criminal justice when he returned to college. I want to help families like ours, he said. People who get targeted by predators hiding behind wealth and respectability. Sarah had indeed returned to school, pursuing a degree in victim advocacy. She'd already begun speaking at conferences about psychological manipulation and financial abuse. Her story was helping other women recognize the warning signs of controlling relationships disguised as romantic devotion. Mom, Sarah said, shifting Hope to her shoulder for burping, I need to ask you something. Anything, sweetheart. How did you know? How did you figure out that something was wrong when everyone else, including me, believed Brandon was perfect? I thought about that question for a long time before answering. I think it was the way he never let you speak for yourself. Real love doesn't require constant supervision. Real love trusts you to make your own choices and have your own thoughts. But you risked everything on just a feeling. Not just a feeling, I corrected. I risked everything on love. Your father taught me that love means protecting the people you care about, even when it's dangerous, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. Marcus Webb had become a regular visitor to our little family gatherings. He'd helped me set up a foundation using the restitution money from the Whitmore assets, providing legal aid and private investigation services to families being threatened by powerful predators. We'd already helped 8 families escape similar situations. Agnes insisted on being Hope's honorary grandmother, spoiling her with handmade blankets and toys. Agent Rivera stopped by occasionally, bringing stories of other cases where our evidence had helped prosecute corruption in 3 other states. The legal proceedings had revealed the full scope of the Whitmore network. Dozens of city officials faced charges, 5 judges were removed from the bench, and an entire construction industry corruption ring was dismantled. The ripple effects would protect families for generations, but perhaps the most important outcome was what I'd learned about myself. For 67 years, I'd seen myself as someone who happened to a construction worker's wife, a school administrator, a widow getting by on a pension. The Whitmores had tried to intimidate me because they assumed I was powerless. They'd discovered that power doesn't come from money or connections or threats. Real power comes from love strong enough to overcome fear, from determination that refuses to accept injustice, from the willingness to fight for what's right even when the odds seem impossible. Every night when I looked at Hope sleeping peacefully in her crib, I remembered how close we'd come to losing her to a family that saw children as property. Every morning, when Sarah called to tell me about her classes or her advocacy work, I felt grateful that we'd found the courage to fight back. The Whitmore mansion was sold at auction, with proceeds going to their victims. Brandon and Richard's appeals were denied, and they would spend the rest of their meaningful lives in federal prison. The other wives in their network had been freed, their children protected, their families helped to rebuild. Justice had been served, not through violence or revenge, but through patience, intelligence, and the determination to gather truth, no matter how dangerous the process became. I kept Sarah's original note, the one hidden in her wedding bouquet, framed on my kitchen wall. "Mom, please help me. I'm trapped." Below it, I'd added my response. "Always and forever, baby girl. Love, Mom." The most important lesson from our experience was this. Evil often hides behind respectable facades, using wealth and power to intimidate victims into silence. But ordinary people, armed with love and determination, can defeat any predator when they refuse to be intimidated and fight with intelligence instead of emotion. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against corruption isn't a gun or a badge, it's a mother's love that refuses to give up. Now I want to hear from all of you who followed this journey with me. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone tried to control you through fear or intimidation? How did you find the courage to fight back? Or what stopped you from standing up for yourself? Your stories matter, and sharing them helps other people realize they're not alone when facing powerful predators. Please take a moment to like this story if it resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people overcoming extraordinary challenges, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that fighting back is always possible, even when it seems hopeless. Thank you for listening to my family's story, and I hope it gives you the courage to trust your instincts and protect the people you love, no matter how powerful their enemies might seem. Remember, you're stronger than you know, braver than you feel, and more capable of creating change than anyone who tries to intimidate you will ever understand. Take care of yourselves and the people you love.